found meaning in what I was doing, and it had been a long gap of not feeling meaning. So all of a sudden, there was this reason for waking up in the morning, and that reason was to be able to help as many people as possible. And when you have these powerhouses like governments, like institutions like the United Nations, your responsibility is a mandate over millions of people at the same time. One little decision made in a chamber in there can impact an entire country.
Hi, and welcome to Brands and Friends. My name is Chris Kilchling, and in this podcast, I speak to fellow creatives about branding and our journeys in the creative industries. Today's guest is Camila Garay. She's a creative director and former art director at Unicef in New York. Great to have you, Cam.
Thanks, Chris.
How are you doing?
I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm super excited too. I think there's a lot of amazing stuff to talk about and things to learn from each other and reflect on the different journeys that we've had in the industry. Do you want to maybe start to just give us a short insight into what you've done, how you started in the creative industries and your journey and where you're at now?
Sure. So I'm a creative director, specialized in branding, but with a big passion for human rights and science. And before being in this freelance space that I'm at the moment, consultancy space, I was running a design team at the UN, at Unicef. And before that, it was a long career in advertising that is a whole story on its own.
I'm sure.
And previous to that, design studios. Yeah.
Okay. Sounds like you've done a few different things in your life. So it wasn't the most linear path to your happy place, I would think, right now. Are you're freelancing right now?
Yes.
Consulting and freelancing?
Yes.
How did you find navigating those different kind of work environments? Like what felt the most natural to you?
This natural state of the creative is to be in exploring mode. Every project we do, whether you're in fine arts or in film or design, branding, we are constantly unfolding and exploring a topic together with the client most of the time. And so it's like, I think it's inevitable that we as individuals also do that with our time and our lives. I felt that the containers that I was in, so the university and from high school, then university, and then later on agency worlds, were sort of the natural places that a creative person should be in. So I never second guessed it. There was never a moment, I didn't have what you had, this sort of like realization that this is not my thing. I was like, let me unfold in all of these different ways. And there was always these interesting things in these worlds that I didn't know. In advertising, we have all these big carrots of, money. There's awards. There's a lot of things to do in there, and also these rankings. So you can become a creative director one day from being a little this. And so I always felt that these spaces were interesting until they weren't anymore.
So it was like a natural progression, kind of like it happened organically for you. You went with whatever felt right at the time, I guess.
The gravity pull toward what makes you feel alive, and where your work starts to be alive, because you can tell on what you're making. Something has been done with intent or blah.
Absolutely.
And so that feeling of looking at something you've done and not being happy about it is such a personal letdown that it became a mission to keep on unfolding in the right direction. Yeah.
So it sounds like there were moments for you where you felt fulfilled in what you did, and whether that was, as an employee, or whether that was working in an agency, or whether that was as a freelancer or consultant. There's always moments where you feel like, okay, what I'm doing makes sense, it feels good, there's no reason to pivot or do something else, there's no reason for a major shift. But, I really want to talk to you about how you eventually ended up at Unicef. Because, well, first of all, that's not necessarily a part of the creative industries, right? It's something completely else. and you've gone through the different stages, working for agencies and done all of that. But it seems like there was a point in your life where you felt like, I wanted to like, was it a point where you felt like, okay, what I'm doing here does not feel good anymore? Or is it like you felt like there's no meaning in what I do, or it's just what you weren't making a difference?
The idea of spending time in a place that helps people was always there. So social design and social development was always the topic where I was most passionate about, even within the agency world. They were giving me all the pro bono stuff to do.
Okay.
That was like the happy bubble that I was in, aside of packaging bread and cars and you know the classic client portfolios. And it was a moment where I took a break. I was in the UAE, and there was these limitless budgets, and I felt that even then, I'm done. I'm saturated, and I actually fell into a clinical depression during that time, which was the body's way of saying you're not walking in your purpose here.
Yeah.
This is not doing it for you anymore. And in that 6 months break that I took, I found out that a friend was working at Unicef in Nicaragua on a project. She had done a very classic traditional journey into the UN, studied international relations. She was surrounded by research people and policy people. And so I gave her a call and asked, are you willing to play with a designer? And she said she didn't really know what that would mean.
Yeah.
She spoke to her boss, and they gave me a call and said, why don't you come here and test it out? So I flew from, at that time, then Sweden to Nicaragua, and sort of transitioned into a social development world that didn't know design work, didn't know creativity. The service that a creative person did was maybe a flyer at the end of a project to sort of like announce that something had happened.
They would give that to an agency or like an outsider or something just to...
Yeah. I mean, barely. But what happened was that UNICEF was in a space where they were trying to convince private sector in Nicaragua to join them in part of their social responsibility, corporate responsibility piece. And they were struggling a little bit with clarity. There was a big research piece behind it. There was policies that needed to be done, and there's a lot of components, but messy. No one really understood, like, what is it that's happening here? And coming in from the branding world, our job is to clarify. Our job is to make things simple, like explain it to a 5-year-old. What are we doing here? And applying that process into their policy process, something magique
happens
there.
Wow.
And the project became clear. We were all understanding. Results came out, obviously, in different types of graphic pieces. But the most important part was that the aim of getting private sector on board during that time in Nicaragua worked. They came on board, signed all the contracts, everyone was happy, and the project succeeded. And that was a massive light bulb in my head. It's like all of this work and experience, the listening that we do as designers, the understanding, the empathy, the intelligence, the craftsmanship, this can live in a different place. This can live in a place that has massive impact on people. And that's where it sort of shifted in my head. And then fast forward a couple of months, I was in New York headquarters, which is the United Nations headquarters. And that was.
And UNICEF is part of that, right?
Yes, so UNICEF is the part of the United Nations that deals with child rights.
Sure.
So that's their mandate. Anything childhood is their job, and it's the agency of the United Nations.
Okay, cool. That sounds amazing. I want to drill this down a little bit deeper, but I also want to backtrack it a bit. If you're okay to talk about this, because you just mentioned that you fell into a depression, and it's maybe you can tell us a little bit more about how that happened for you. Was it just the pressure of the work environment? What was it? A combination of things? Was it you not feeling fulfilled and happy in what you did, or how did How did that happen?
Yeah, it's a combination of shutting down your body and going in default mode and keep on running and running and running in a space that's not nurturing you anymore. It can be in relationships, can be professionally. And in my case, it was fully professional.
Okay.
The lack of inspiration made me lethargic, but I was still operating physically.
Because you probably you had to, right?
I had to. Instead of running these projects now, and it's expensive, and clients and responsibility.
This was in the UAE?
This was in the UAE.
Okay.
It's the highest paid job I had ever had at that point. And I was like, I can't just drop the ball here.
Sure.
So I kept on going, but my sadness grew bigger every single day until I couldn't get out of bed anymore. Like physically, I could not move.
Wow.
I went into a health center, met a psychiatrist, and she said, "Well, you're clinically depressed." She did a couple of tests on me, and said, "You're officially in a dark place. Let us work together to get you out of there."
Okay.
And yeah.
You've lived in Cape Town for quite some time, which is has quite a chilled out vibe to it.
Very chilled.
Very chilled.
We're working here.
People
are working here.
People are working here.
The ones that really work are in Johannesburg and in other places.
I think you can work here. You know, it doesn't mean that Cape Town slows you down to the point where you cannot get work done. I think we all can.
Totally feel the drive. Yes.
Yeah. But I mean, I've heard this from many people who say I had to leave Cape Town to get shit done. Yeah, and Cape Town is a comfortable place. You know, you can live really well in Cape Town without actually needing so much because you got all this natural beauty around you.
You just go to the beach every single day,
climb a mountain,
watch the sunset,
do beautiful stuff. Let it slow you down if that's what you want, and you are going to be happy. You know, but comfort is a funny thing, and I think every ambitious and successful person sees it as sees danger in too much comfort, because that's when you stop growing, that's when you stop challenging yourself, that's when you stop trying new stuff, and that's when you stop progressing. So tell me a bit about New York. How was that like to all of a sudden be in that crazy frenzy and fast-paced world, which is so different to Cape Town?
I mean, it was a beautiful abusive relationship. Like, I look back at that and go, wow, that was a lot. I was visiting New York very briefly for like a 5-day stint before going there, and I remember sitting on the plane back to, I think it was Sweden, and I was vibrating. My entire body was in vibration mode just from having existed in that space for 5 days.
Wow.
And that physical reaction just told me there's something here that is, you're pulled to this.
The energy is strong, right?
The energy is strong. There's 10 million people all existing in this one surface. It's one of the most expensive cities to live in, which then leads you to having to be ambitious to exist there. Because if you're not making money, you're being spit out the other way. And so that just creates this energy in people to want to do things and want to do it in the best possible way.
So I guess it's because there's a need for it. You have people work 3 jobs just to be able to afford that expensive little shoebox that people live in.
Yeah.
But it also, I suppose that's the whole idea behind the American system, is to get you into that mode where you're like, no, I want to be the best, and I want to achieve the most, and I want to make the most money.
Yeah.
That's the only way you're going to actually make it in a city like New York, I suppose.
Totally. And I think it was the first time I felt that level of ambition around me. In the creative agency world, I felt that my directors were sometimes a little what? They had sort of lost the spark, and if you wanted to do something special, you're the only one wanting to do that. Whereas there, you have a buffet of human beings that are just operating in athletic mode in every single way, in finance and creativity, in social development, and the whole spectrum. So you get to play with all of these humans, and they're very knowledgeable of what's going on in their universes. You're tapping into one person, and they're at their peak.
Yeah.
And so now we're doing a lot of interesting things here. Yeah, and financially you get paid much better than most places also.
Because you have to.
Yeah.
Right? You have to.
So there's a lot of incentives of being there. Although I did leave New York quite tired and had to come back and sort of like refuel after almost 6 years. I wouldn't change anything, and I miss it every day.
Yeah?
Yeah.
You think about it?
I miss it every day.
Okay.
All the time.
Wow. That's interesting. I really want to talk a little bit about your job at Unicef, because you told me a story the other day how you kind of like came in through a back door, and UNICEF is kind of like this institution which is obviously world renowned. We all know what UNICEF is, but it's not a creative place as such, and it's full of data scientists and all kinds of non-creative people. And you told me how you've kind of created a job for yourself within that space. Like you came in saying, hey, I think what you guys need is this. And I can do that for you.
Yeah.
And you ended up sort of creating your own dream job at such a major institution. How do you do that? Was that the way it happened?
By being patient. By seeing that although a place like the United Nations doesn't really have creative representation, like in the format that we know it as an agency, you have all of the hierarchies. In the UN, you don't have any representation of what creativity can be like. And I knew that having worked in Nicaragua, the power of what we were able to do within design for these social development projects, it was there. I was already convinced. I had taken the pill. I knew what was going on, but they didn't know. They didn't know yet what was going to come. I joined a big data and research team. It's like 200 data scientists and research people, and I came in as a designer inside of this space. And they were not the most enthusiastic about having me there. They were like, why is this designer girl here? Why is she always in the meetings asking a lot of questions? If I'll need something designed, let me just like throw it at her later. But no, I was insisting to be part of the research processes and the articulation of what was going on in there. And a lot of the work and the products that this department was making was evidence. So they were producing evidence about how children are doing, where in the world they are, and what we need to go and do about it.
Okay.
So it's a very powerful seat.
At the table.
And I think I cried every day for a year without them knowing it.
Okay.
Because I felt so unwelcomed in that space.
Wow.
No one understood what I was doing. No one understood why I was getting paid in here. Why should this girl asking questions all the time, which is what designers do. You keep on asking questions.
Totally.
What are we doing? What's the
discovering,
meaning?
understanding,
unfolding, peeling, and so that I can design the best thing for you in this project. But then, little by little, people started to see their work be clearer. They started to see it being beautiful, understood by others. And then once it was released in the world, it started getting more impact. So if you have a research piece of 500 pages, a report that says, kids in this country need this stuff, please action on this immediately, because otherwise we're going to have crazy consequences. That's important information.
Sure.
That's very important information. And once you pair that with visibility, emotional, because you can package it as a classic report, you can also make a documentary out of that. You can also make an exhibition, a photography thing. Like, how many creative veins can we push in so people react and feel that this data, these numbers, these text and paragraphs are dry, are translating into being a human thing.
Totally.
And and eventually they all wanted a designer.
Okay. So they got the picture after a while.
They understood and then allowed me to hire more people which then became a design team.
Wow. Okay. So there's two things here. So firstly, I think everything that is being done there is being researched there. All the information that you put out there is sure. It's numbers and it's graphs and it's pie charts and it's projections and all of that. That's very dry. But the impact of that is huge emotionally for people, right? So it makes total sense to put a whole new spin on that in the way that you communicate that to the world. And then what I'm really, like, after listening to you, what I'm really interested in right now is why did you push through? Why were you so set on convincing them and, going home crying every day and feeling like these people don't actually want me there? Like
big bad world.
Yeah, bad world. But like you pushed through it, and you overcome and you achieved what you wanted to achieve. Was it just that? Did you feel so strong about what you could bring to the party, or what was it?
I found meaning in what I was doing, and it had been a long gap of not feeling meaning. So all of a sudden, there was this reason for waking up in the morning. And that reason was to be able to help as many people as possible. And when you have these powerhouses like governments, like institutions like the United Nations, your responsibility is a mandate over millions of people at the same time. One little decision made in a chamber in there can impact an entire country. So where do I go if I want to actually have any type of positive impact with what I do, whether that is a graphic piece or anything else? Well, it's in those places of power. And that was enough fuel to sustain all of the naysayers, all of the misunderstandings, all of the convincing, long educational meetings, so on and so forth. That was the fuel.
And you had a team of, you were able to build your own team of designers, and
little by little. Started with one incredible designer coming in. So the design schools around New York were sort of attached already. It's like a little hub for innovation. It's like the innovation hub, a pool of people to pull from. And so we got an incredible designer in. Like they say, always hire people that are better than you at doing stuff.
So you can learn something from them.
Yeah, and this girl was a beast.
Oh yeah.
Pour us savant. We got love for you. Incredible, like sharp brain in research, but also very skilled in craft and actual design. And so, boom, work got elevated, and I could then have more of a more say and more power in getting more people in. And so it started to roll, and we could take on bigger and bigger projects, which sort of benefited the space itself. And
another thing that is interesting to me is how you also seem to have transitioned from just being a creative designer that sort of answers briefs towards becoming a team lead. And that is, like I spoke about it earlier a little bit when I spoke about all the challenges that I had in that transition. I mean, the shift is huge. It was such a big thing for me to, having to do all these new things, challenging myself, jumping from meeting to meeting, from call to call, without having any sort of time to prepare myself for it, and talking to, really sharp people, and having to be on my A game all the time, and feeling like I'm taking meetings like on a moment's notice, where before that I would have prepared myself for days for it, just because I feel like, oh, this is big, like take my go do my thinking, prepare myself, be ready. And
how scary was that space for you?
I appreciate it for simply because I know that where the challenges is where the juice is. This is where you learn. This is where you grow. This is where everything good happens. I don't know if you've seen this graphic with like this big circle, and then this says the comfort zone, and then like there's this dot like far away from it, and this is where everything good kind of like happens to you. So I was at a point where I realized, okay, cool, this is a challenge, but you kind of have to go through it. And I mean, it worked. You just learn to take the responsibility, and I also learned to break down that word response. ability.
Yeah.
Right? You learn to respond. The ability to respond to things without being prepared for it.
I've never seen it like that before.
Yeah, I read that the other day.
Unseen now.
Yeah, you cannot unsee it, and you shouldn't. I think it's a super important thing to understand.
What did it give you to now have responsibility over other creatives? What happened there for you?
I think I've started to connect with the idea of sharing knowledge and having other people learn from me. I think I'm naturally a bit of a mentor teacher kind of a guy as well. Like I've always enjoyed working with juniors and just sharing my experiences and helping them grow and helping them understand. So it was an amazing experience for me to transition into that role where you're not just responsible for yourself and responsible for this little piece of design, this little logo that you're crafting, and then you're giving it to the world. You kind of understand there's you can give so much more when you step out of that precious little space where you're so like precious about everything that you do, and you kind of understand that no, you have more to give, and you can only do that if you transition into a leadership role. Beautiful. Where you have your team and you work on stuff together, and you also just seeing them grow and helping them develop is a beautiful thing to me.
It's exciting.
It is exciting.
I'm mad excited about talent.
Yeah.
Young talent. Haven't gone through all of the hurdles and all the dips and highs, and and you can see that this person with a little bit of nurturing, a little bit of support can.
Yeah. You just need to see the potential in them, and then you just sort of help them connect with that and unlock that, and it's a beautiful thing to see that. But yeah, there was many challenges for me, just from also just like I said, just not having the time anymore to retreat into my little happy place, my little corner, and shut the door and try to be so perfect and be so precious about what I do, and learning that you have to keep it moving, right? Because it really doesn't matter that it doesn't matter if you're always right. It just matters to keep it moving and to have a response to what life throws at you, right?
This idea of a meaning and purpose in what we do with our time as designers and as creatives, because it's so linked to our well-being, our actual results of the stuff we make. It's so intertwined, and I'm finding myself in a place where I'm re-articulating the purpose of things, rethinking them again. Is it in these big institutions? Is it in these places of power? Is it in a completely different universe? What does that look like? And that it can be a scary space to be sort of like shifting the path that you walk on. And I feel that we're always going to do it. We're going to be constantly in that shifting mode. Like Chris and Cam, age 50, age 70, age 90 will be sort of recalibrating our lives over and over. And and that's something that's on my mind a lot. And one thing that I'm exercising the most at the moment is this idea of expansion. And what happens if all of the blocks of what I used to do and what I used to be are removed? What happens then? Where is my limitlessness going as a creative? If your passion is within the science and the human rights, how far can you push that? Where are those pockets? Where are these places to exist? If it is within music, if it is fashion, wherever it is, this idea that what you're making and your talent and your innate empath has incredible force to do its thing out there in the world and make it better. Just by existing and applying your time.
Totally. I think that's what we do as creatives. Thank you so much, Camila, for coming to talk to me. There were some really deep insights from your side, and it's really good to talk to you about that. And I hope it brings some value to other people as well.
And thank you for making the space and making the container for this all to exist inside. We need it.
I think so too.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you for tuning into Brands and Friends. If you would like to support this podcast, just hit the like button, leave us some feedback in the comments, and subscribe to this channel.